On the morning of October 14, 2018, a woman known in the Fatih district of Istanbul as Ilara Rousseau, a reclusive Canadian painter with a penchant for capturing the city's fading Byzantine-era frescoes, applied a final, delicate layer of ultramarine pigment to her canvas. The studio, a rented top-floor apartment overlooking the Golden Horn, was suffused with the scent of linseed oil and turpentine, a carefully curated environment that supported her identity with the mundane authenticity of 1,000 small details. Her movements were precise, economical, and betrayed a discipline far exceeding that of a simple artist. The way she cleaned her brushes, the systematic arrangement of her tools, and the unnerving stillness with which she observed the street below spoke not of creative contemplation, but of professional vigilance. Ilara Rousseau did not exist. She was a legend, a meticulously constructed fiction animated by a woman whose real name was known to only a handful of individuals in a sterile, windowless building outside Tel Aviv. She was a combatant in the Mossad's clandestine intelligence division, known as Caesarea, and her true purpose in Istanbul had nothing to do with art. Her target, a man named Salim al-Hamri, was at that moment finishing his morning tea in a cafe 3 blocks away, utterly oblivious that the quiet artist who had sketched his portrait a month prior was the fulcrum of a complex, multi-year operation designed for the sole purpose of his permanent removal. The strategic problem facing the Israeli intelligence community in the late 2010s was one of diffusion and decentralization. The primary conduits for funding organizations like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad were no longer simple cash transfers or state-sponsored bank transactions that could be tracked and intercepted through conventional signals intelligence or financial forensics. Instead, they had morphed into a sophisticated, multi-layered international network of shell corporations, cryptocurrency exchanges, and informal hawala money transfer systems that exploited the legal and financial gray zones of ostensibly neutral countries. Turkey, under its increasingly Islamist-leaning government, had become a critical nexus in this network, providing a permissive environment where operatives could conduct business, procure materials, and channel funds with a degree of freedom unheard of elsewhere in the region. At the heart of this Istanbul-based operation was Salim al-Hamri, a man whose public profile was that of a successful import-export businessman, but whose actual function was as the chief financial architect for Hamas's military wing. Previous attempts to disrupt his network had proven frustratingly ineffective. Electronic surveillance yielded encrypted communications that were unbreakable in real time. Attempts to recruit human assets from within his inner circle had failed, thwarted by his extreme paranoia and the deep ideological commitment of his subordinates. A kinetic operation, such as a drone strike or a long-range assassination, was politically impossible in a NATO member country and carried an unacceptably high risk of catastrophic diplomatic fallout. Al-Hamri was not just a target, he was an embedded, systemic challenge, a node so critical that his removal was deemed essential to crippling the operational capacity of Hamas for the foreseeable future. The stakes were extraordinarily high, as intelligence indicated his network was in the final stages of financing a new wave of advanced rocket procurement and tunnel-building projects in Gaza, making the need for a solution both urgent and paramount. Salim al-Hamri was a product of his environment, a man forged in the crucible of the Palestinian diaspora and hardened by decades of clandestine activity. Born in a refugee camp in Lebanon, he had demonstrated an early aptitude for mathematics and logistics, skills that were quickly co-opted by emerging militant factions. He was not a frontline fighter or a charismatic ideologue, his power was more insidious and far-reaching. He was a creature of shadows, a master of ledgers and back channels who understood that modern conflict was fueled as much by untraceable financial transactions as by bullets and explosives. His psychological profile, compiled by Mossad's behavioral science unit, depicted a man of immense self-control, discipline, and profound mistrust. He adhered to a rigid daily routine that varied by no more than a few minutes, a behavioral pattern designed to frustrate surveillance and expose any anomalies in his surroundings. He employed no personal bodyguards, correctly assessing that they would be a conspicuous vulnerability. Instead, he relied on layers of counter-surveillance, constantly changing his walking routes, utilizing public transport at unpredictable times, and maintaining multiple, nondescript apartments across the city. His digital hygiene was impeccable, he never used a personal computer or smartphone for sensitive matters, relying instead on a system of couriers and single-use communication devices. His only discernible vulnerability, the single crack in his otherwise impenetrable facade, was a deep, intellectual passion for Ottoman history and calligraphy. He would spend hours in the city's older districts, frequenting antique bookshops and small, private museums. It was a sterile, academic passion, devoid of personal connection, but it was the only predictable deviation from his operational life, the only sphere in which he allowed his guard to drop, even fractionally. This seemingly minor detail became the focal point around which the entire operational concept would be built. The proposed solution, codenamed Operation Daedalus, was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its complexity. It rejected all conventional approaches of direct assault or technical penetration in favor of a long-term proximity operation centered on a single, deeply embedded human asset. The plan was not to turn someone in al-Hamri's circle, but to introduce a new, seemingly innocuous individual into his limited social orbit and slowly, patiently, cultivate a relationship of casual acquaintance. This asset would not be a honey trap in the traditional sense. The goal was not seduction, which al-Hamri's profile suggested would be impossible, but the establishment of a non-threatening, intellectually resonant presence that could eventually grant the physical access required for a close-quarters neutralization. The concept hinged entirely on exploiting his one identified vulnerability, his love for Ottoman art and history. The operational planners theorized that if they could place an operative, disguised as an authentic expert or artist in that specific field, in his path, he might, over a period of many months, come to accept their presence as a normal part of his environment. The obstacles were monumental. The operative would need to possess or acquire a doctorate-level knowledge of Ottoman art, speak fluent, culturally attuned Turkish and Arabic, and maintain a flawless cover identity for an indefinite period in a high-surveillance environment. The technical challenges involved creating a legend so robust it could withstand the scrutiny of Turkish intelligence, should she ever come to their attention. The psychological pressure on the operative would be immense, requiring a rare combination of patience, resilience, and clinical detachment. The risk of exposure was constant, and the consequences of failure were catastrophic: the certain death of the operative, a major international incident with Turkey, and the complete compromise of Mossad's operational methods in the region. The technological and tactical preparations for Operation Daedalus were a testament to the Mossad's ethos of meticulous, obsessive detail. The first phase involved the creation of the tools for the final act. The Science and Technology Division, known as Neviat, was tasked with developing a neutralization method that would be silent, untraceable, and could be deployed in a fleeting moment of opportunity. They ruled out firearms and conventional blades due to the certainty of detection. Instead, they focused on advanced chemical agents. After months of research, they synthesized a unique, fast-acting neurotoxin derived from a rare species of marine snail. The toxin induced rapid cardiac arrest but denatured and became completely undetectable in the bloodstream within minutes of death, ensuring any subsequent autopsy would conclude the cause was a simple heart attack. The delivery system was equally ingenious. It was a modified fountain pen, a high-end Mont Blanc, a brand favored by Istanbul's business elite. The pen's internal ink cartridge was replaced with a pressurized canister containing a single, 50 microliter dose of the toxin. The nib was replaced with a retractable, needle-fine filament of tungsten, measuring only 0.2 mm in diameter and coated in a material that minimized skin puncture marks. A minute, almost imperceptible contact with the target's skin for less than half a second would be sufficient to deliver the lethal dose. For surveillance, the technical team developed a series of throwaway audio and video transmitters disguised as everyday objects: a loose button, a Turkish lira coin, a small pebble, that could be discreetly placed and activated remotely to monitor key locations for short periods, their limited battery life a trade-off for their microscopic size and undetectability. Secure communication with the operative would be handled through a proprietary, quantum-encrypted platform embedded within a seemingly normal art history blogging application on a burner tablet, the data hidden using advanced steganography within the pixels of uploaded image files. The selection of the operative was the most critical element of the entire plan. The role demanded a unique constellation of traits that few individuals possessed. After a rigorous screening process of dozens of candidates within Caesarea, the operational command selected a 29-year-old woman known only by her codename, Yael. Yael was not a typical field operative. She had been recruited from an academic background in art history at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, her specialty being Islamic and Ottoman art. She possessed a photographic memory and an innate linguistic ability, already fluent in English, French, and Arabic. Her psychological profile indicated an exceptionally high degree of emotional regulation, patience, and an almost unsettling capacity for compartmentalization, traits likely stemming from a traumatic childhood event that had instilled in her a powerful, yet cold, sense of ideological conviction. Her motivation was not patriotic fervor but a deeply personal and calculated desire for retribution against the architects of terror. For the next 18 months, Yael ceased to exist. She was immersed in a grueling, all-encompassing training program. She spent 6 months in an intensive language school, not just learning Turkish but mastering the specific dialect and cultural idioms of Istanbul's educated elite. She was tutored by Israel's foremost experts on Ottoman calligraphy and miniature painting until her knowledge became indistinguishable from that of a lifelong academic. Her physical training was just as rigorous, focusing on urban evasion, defensive driving, and the subtle art of gray man movement, blending into any crowd, becoming utterly unmemorable. Most importantly, she underwent relentless psychological conditioning, participating in simulated interrogations and high-stress scenarios designed to fortify her cover identity until it became her primary reality, a process the Mossad refers to as building the legend from the inside out. She was repeatedly told that Alara Rousseau was real and Yael was the ghost, a mental inversion necessary to survive the profound isolation of deep cover. The construction of the cover identity, or legend, for Alara Rousseau was an operation in itself, a multi-million-dollar exercise in fabricating a life. A team from the Lapid division, responsible for psychological warfare and propaganda, was tasked with building her backstory. They chose the identity of a Canadian citizen from Montreal, a city with a diverse population that would make her mixed heritage and linguistic skills plausible. They began by creating a digital ghost, a trail of existence that went back decades. They hacked into Canadian government databases to insert a birth certificate, a social insurance number, and passport records. They created elementary and high school records, including fabricated report cards and yearbook photos, cleverly photoshopping Yael's younger face into archival images. They established a bank account in her name at a Montreal bank and conducted small, regular transactions for years to build a history. They created a comprehensive online footprint for Alara, a sparsely updated Facebook profile with a few dozen carefully vetted friends, all Mossad-controlled accounts, an Instagram account showcasing her supposed artwork and travels, and a professional profile on LinkedIn listing her as a freelance art historian. They even purchased a small, real apartment in her name in Montreal, paid the utilities, and had a local asset collect her mail to create a tangible physical anchor for her identity. Her artistic credentials were built with similar precision. They created a fake portfolio of her work, commissioning an actual artist to produce dozens of paintings in a consistent style. They then had these paintings sold through small, obscure online galleries and even arranged for her name to be mentioned in the footnotes of a few obscure art history journals, all part of building a verifiable, multi-layered, and ultimately believable fiction. Props were acquired to complete the illusion: a well-worn leather satchel, a collection of antique art books with personalized inscriptions, and even a pair of prescription glasses with a faint, almost invisible scratch on the lens, a small imperfection designed to enhance the overall authenticity of her character. In August of 2018, the operational phase began. Yael, now fully embodying the persona of Alara Rousseau, flew from Toronto to Paris, then to Rome, and finally to Istanbul, a deliberately convoluted travel route designed to obscure her point of origin. She entered Turkey on a legitimate Canadian passport, her legend having been meticulously backstopped by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service in a covert liaison exchange. She rented the pre-scouted apartment in the Fadi district, a neighborhood chosen for its proximity to Al-Hamri's known areas of activity and its population of artists and expatriates, which allowed her to blend in seamlessly. Her first 3 months in the city were a period of deliberate and painstaking acclimatization. She established a routine that was both plausible for an artist and operationally sound. She spent her mornings painting in her studio, her afternoons visiting museums and historical sites, and her evenings at quiet local cafes, always with a sketchbook in hand. She made no effort to approach Al-Hamri. The objective was to become part of the local scenery, a familiar, unremarkable face. Her handler, communicating through the encrypted art blog, instructed her to focus on passive establishment. She established a reputation as a quiet, serious academic, speaking only when spoken to, her interactions with shopkeepers and neighbors polite but brief. She was building a pattern of normalcy, a baseline of behavior against which any deviation would be measured. This period was a supreme test of her psychological fortitude. The isolation was total, the tension relentless. Every person she met was a potential threat, every conversation a performance. She lived in a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning for surveillance, for any sign that her cover had been compromised, all while projecting an aura of artistic distraction. The build-up to the climax was a slow, methodical process of manufactured chance. After 3 months of passive observation, Yael's handler gave the green light to initiate the first, indirect contact. Following intelligence that Al-Hamri was a regular patron of a specific, small antiquarian bookstore near the Grand Bazaar, Yael began to frequent the same shop. For weeks, she did nothing but browse, occasionally purchasing a book on Islamic art and engaging the elderly shopkeeper in brief, academic conversations. Her objective was to be seen by Al-Hamri, to register in his peripheral vision as a fellow enthusiast. The first encounter occurred in late November. Al-Hamri was examining a rare 16th-century manuscript when Yael, seemingly by accident, dropped a portfolio of her sketches nearby. As she gathered the loose papers, one sketch, a detailed rendering of a calligraphic panel from the Blue Mosque, slid near his feet. He picked it up, his eyes lingering on the technical precision of her work. He handed it back to her with a curt, almost imperceptible nod of approval. He said nothing, but the first seed of recognition had been planted. Over the next 2 months, this pattern was repeated. They would cross paths in the bookstore, at a small gallery exhibition, or in the courtyard of a historic mosque. Each time, a brief, nonverbal interaction occurred, a shared glance over a display case, a moment of mutual appreciation for a piece of art. Yael never initiated contact, never spoke to him. She allowed him to be the observer, leveraging his own paranoia against him. He would undoubtedly be investigating her, running his own checks. The strength of her legend was now being tested directly. The Mossad's digital warfare unit monitored for any signs of cyber incursions related to her identity and found them, subtle probes into Canadian public records, searches for her name on academic databases. Her legend held firm. The first verbal contact was finally initiated by him, in early February 2019. Seeing her sketching in a cafe, he approached her table and commented, in formal Arabic, on her accurate depiction of Kufic script. Yael responded in kind, feigning slight surprise but maintaining a professional, detached demeanor. She explained that she was an art historian researching the development of Ottoman decorative arts. The conversation was brief, academic, and entirely impersonal. It was the crucial breakthrough the operation had been waiting for. The final phases of the operation unfolded with the chilling precision of a well-rehearsed play. Over the subsequent 6 weeks, Yael and Al-Hamri developed a routine of casual, infrequent conversations. Their interactions were always confined to public spaces and strictly limited to their shared academic interests. She became his bookstore acquaintance, the foreign expert with whom he could briefly indulge his sole passion. Yael meticulously logged every detail of these meetings, his mannerisms, his choice of words, the subtle shifts in his posture that might indicate his level of comfort or suspicion. She never pressed for personal information, never steered the conversation away from art. She played her role perfectly, becoming a safe, intellectually stimulating, and non-threatening fixture in his carefully controlled world. The signal to proceed with the final act came on a Tuesday in late March. A new image appeared on her art blog, a photo of a specific, pre-agreed-upon Byzantine mosaic. It was the "execute" command. The intelligence that triggered the order was specific. Al-Hamri was scheduled to personally oversee a major cash transfer at a private office in the Beyoğlu district in 2 days' time. It was a rare moment when he would be stationary, indoors, and with minimal security. The plan was for Yael to engineer a final meeting just before he departed for that appointment. The next day, she sent him a short, encrypted message via a secure, one-time use email address they had previously established for exchanging academic articles. She wrote that she had just acquired a rare treatise on the works of the calligrapher Sheikh Hamdullah and asked if he might be interested in seeing it before she left Istanbul for a research trip. As predicted, his intellectual curiosity overrode his innate caution. He agreed to meet her at her studio for a brief viewing the following morning, an unprecedented breach of his own security protocols and a testament to the trust she had so patiently cultivated. The trap was set. On the morning of March 28, 2019, Yael prepared her studio not as an artist, but as an executioner. The Mont Blanc pen lay on a workbench, indistinguishable from her other drawing tools. She had brewed a pot of strong Turkish coffee, its aroma filling the small space, a simple act of hospitality that would serve as a disarming tool. She was dressed in a simple linen blouse and trousers, her appearance casual and non-threatening. Her heart rate, monitored by her handler via a biometric sensor woven into her watch strap, was steady at 68 beats per minute, a sign of her extraordinary emotional control. Al-Hamri arrived precisely at 10 a.m. He was visibly tense, his eyes scanning every corner of the room, his body language coiled and wary. He refused her offer of coffee, a predictable precaution. Yael showed no reaction, simply nodding and proceeding to the matter at hand. She led him to a large wooden table where she had laid out the rare treatise, in reality, a convincing forgery created by Mossad's documents division. As he leaned over the book, his attention completely absorbed by the intricate calligraphy, Yael moved to his side, ostensibly to point out a specific detail on the page. In that single, fluid motion, her right hand, holding the fountain pen, brushed against the back of his left hand, which was resting on the table. The tungsten needle, extended by a silent, spring-loaded mechanism, made contact with his skin for no more than a quarter of a second. It was a touch so light it could have been mistaken for a stray thread on her sleeve. Al-Hamri did not even flinch. He remained engrossed in the manuscript for another 30 seconds, then straightened up, thanked her for her time, and turned to leave. As his hand reached the doorknob, he faltered. A look of confusion crossed his face. He took one more step, then collapsed, his fall cushioned by a thick Persian rug she had strategically placed. The entire event, from the moment of contact to his death, had taken less than 90 seconds. There was no sound, no struggle, just a quiet, clinical end. Yael's escape and extraction procedures were executed with the same dispassionate efficiency as the act itself. She did not check Al-Hamri's body, she knew the toxin was infallible. Her first action was to initiate a full data wipe of her tablet and burner phone, activating a thermite charge embedded in their casings that incinerated the internal circuitry in seconds. She then moved to the bathroom, where she removed her clothes and sealed them in a prepared biohazard bag. She scrubbed her hands and face with a specialized chemical agent that removed any trace of her DNA and any potential residue from the toxin. Dressed in a new set of clothes, a plain headscarf, a long coat, and nondescript shoes that changed her silhouette entirely, she was a different person. She took a single, small backpack containing a new set of forged travel documents under a different name and a small amount of cash. She left everything else behind, the art supplies, the canvases, the books, the entire curated existence of Alara Rousseau, now an empty shell. She walked out of the apartment, locking the door behind her, and descended to the street, melting into the morning crowds. She did not look back. She followed a pre-planned exfiltration route that involved 3 changes of taxi and a short journey on a public ferry across the Bosphorus to the Asian side of the city. At each stage, she was passively observed by members of a Mossad support team who were in place to intervene only in the event of an emergency. Her final destination was a small, private marina near Pendik. A nondescript fishing trawler, purchased months earlier by a Mossad front company and retrofitted with a high-speed engine, was waiting. She boarded the vessel, which immediately cast off and headed into the Sea of Marmara, bound for international waters where she would rendezvous with an Israeli Navy vessel. By the time Turkish authorities, alerted by Al-Hamri's concerned associates, broke down the door of the Fatih studio 12 hours later, she was gone. They found a scene that was both baffling and immaculate, a dead man with no signs of trauma, and an apartment filled with the belongings of a foreign artist who, according to all official records, had simply vanished. The aftermath of Operation Daedalus sent shockwaves through the clandestine world. Al-Hamri's death, officially attributed by Turkish investigators to a sudden cardiac event, caused immediate and catastrophic disruption within Hamas's financial network. Without his central leadership and logistical genius, the organization was thrown into disarray. Planned funding transfers were halted, communication chains broke down, and a wave of internal paranoia swept through the ranks as they fruitlessly searched for a traitor who did not exist. The strategic value of the intelligence gathered during the operation was immense. Data gleaned from the brief monitoring of Al-Hamri's patterns provided new insights into the network structure, leading to the subsequent disruption of several more cells across Europe and the Middle East. Politically, the operation was a complete success, as it left behind no forensic evidence, no smoking gun that could be traced back to Israel, thus avoiding any diplomatic crisis with Turkey. The Turkish investigation eventually went cold, concluding that the mysterious Canadian painter was likely an innocent civilian who had fled in terror after witnessing the man's sudden death. The legend of Alara Rousseau was retired, her digital footprint slowly erased until she became nothing more than a ghost in the system. For Yael, the consequences were more profound and personal. She was lauded as a hero within the intelligence community, her name entering the secret annals of Mossad's most successful operations. But the mission had irrevocably altered her. The psychological cost of living a fabricated life, of maintaining absolute emotional control in the face of constant danger, and of taking a human life with such clinical intimacy, left a permanent scar. She had been transformed from an academic into a weapon, and the process, while successful, had hollowed out a part of her humanity. The reflection on the operation within Mossad itself was complex, acknowledging the brilliant success while also recognizing the immense ethical and psychological burdens placed upon the deep-cover operatives who are asked to sacrifice their very identities for the security of the state. Was the long, patient, and psychologically demanding method of Operation Daedalus a more justifiable form of state-sponsored killing than a remote, impersonal drone strike? Does the total erasure of an operative's identity in the service of a mission constitute a form of sacrifice that can ever be truly repaid? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel.